Welcome back to the IPC Apex 2025 Decode podcast. We have a guest here today with us, Phil Marcoux. To me, I messaged you on LinkedIn probably about a month ago, and I looked at your resume of life, and I was just kind of blown away by it, and then we talked. You mentioned a little bit about Darwin AI and how you sold it to Apple, and I was impressed by that. I had created my own internal system using AI, and I wanted to pick your brain, right? And it was amazing. He was like that you even responded because little background here. 2007, the IPC donned you as the father of SMT, right? And if you go back even further of like what you were part of in the 1980s when surface mount technology came about. So it was the fact that he messaged me back, right, and having this experience in this industry, and he said, I'm available in about 2 hours. And I was like, my wife is watching the kids right now. Let me get permission. Right? It was like she was out at some event, a baby shower or something. And I'm like, I'll be free in 2 hours. I was like, I gotta talk to this guy. He wants to actually look at my approach because I wanted to pick your brain. It's not often I get somebody like that. So that's how we met. And today you had an amazing meeting about AI with top heads of the industry and stuff like that. And so I was just kind of curious. How did you get involved with all of that, and what made you want to step back in the EMS field and get it into these problems and solutions type of having AI actually do stuff for us and not just spit out words?
Well, having interacted with, I volunteer with an organization called SCORE, which is part of the U.S. Small Business Administration that helps encourage and stimulate and help small businesses throughout the country. And we've been seeing a number of companies emerging that are starting up, and every fifth word in their business plan was AI. So I figured, there's got to be something to it. And then I live in Silicon Valley, and I'm surrounded by people that have in the past started companies, and I could go around the neighborhood, and about every fourth company was somebody that was in a house that was starting an AI company.
Sure.
So I figured, okay, this has to be. But then I started talking with a number of them, and even though they were highly funded for building their businesses, they weren't getting any traction, and they were really struggling. And it brought back the memories of what happened in the early days of surface mount. People don't realize that in the early 80s, surface mount almost never existed.
Yeah.
And it was shot down, poor use of terms, because it was a group in the U.S. Air Force that actually brought surface mount to a halt because we had allowed components to get into assemblies without appropriately vetting them and doing the appropriate checks. And so things like coefficient of thermal expansion mismatch, terminations on components being leached, these were things that we weren't prepared for, nor had we given them prior check. So a number of us really took it badly economically with the shutdown of surface mount. Fortunately, at the time, the fledgling organization, the IPC, decided that they could be in a position to help. And actually, the Secretary of Defense actually came and encouraged the IPC along with an organization called the EIA to come together to help create an infrastructure for getting surface mount accepted. And so we had 25 executives that volunteered to be part of that charter organization. The organization was called the Surface Mount Council. I was a charter member of that. We agreed to work, not too obviously, but somewhat quietly, to help facilitate an orderly acceptance of surface mount. So our first line of business was to create a roadmap, and that led to the creation of the IPC 782 standards, because at that time everybody felt their land patterns were their own crown jewels. Nobody wanted to share them. The IPC was successful in getting us to agree to share them. We agreed to get funding for some organizations to test the terminations on components and come up with, ultimately a nickel coating to prevent the leaching that was otherwise occurring. Did some studies on coefficient of thermal expansion. Ultimately formed helped create a trade show, which was called SMI, which Apex was the outgrowth of the SMI effort. So, we, if it wasn't for that particular activity and working collectively, we would not have this operation we have now. I'm seeing exactly the same thing happen with AI, and I believe that AI holds the key to a number of benefits and solutions to doing surface mount and other processes that a lot of us had hoped to have had in earlier years. The ability to have an inspection system like an AOI system be able to ultimately tell an earlier, downstream process like an SPI system or a reflow machine. You're the one creating the problems. Stop doing what you're doing wrong. Do it right. Now, today we rely on a human to make that interaction. Well, humans that have the skills necessary to operate this process, unfortunately, have become rather scarce. And so automation is, so I just felt that it was needed to do something similar to the Surface Mount Council and help stimulate a roadmap. I was in a position to help do that in a volunteer basis. Also, the organization, the PCBA, under Mike Buteau, they're in a position to help foster what the what the IPC did years ago, and doesn't seem predisposed to want to do today.
Before we get too far detached from the story you just told about the SMT in its infancy, that's fascinating to me because I hadn't realized that SMT sort of went through a false start is what I'm hearing you say. I thought it was a linear development of technology. There was through-hole and then surface mount came, and it kind of made an unopposed march to prominence. Like modern circuit assemblies have primarily SMT devices on them. So hearing you say that it was developed and then met with opposition and had to be advocated for and championed for, that's a story I haven't heard before.
By him and 24 other people.
Yeah.
Like, you're looking at it right
I know,
there,
it's
right?
crazy.
Yeah.
That's actually crazy.
I was real young at the time.
Well, plus two back then, if you think about it, was gluing it down probably, right? There wasn't a pick-and-place machine probably for it.
I actually saw one of the very first Fuji machines.
Did you really?
And the irony was it was nestled in the back corner of their main factory, and their main factory built props for ships.
Wow.
So, I'm walking in this factory with props that are, 40, 50 feet high. And
Giant.
And the guy who invented the method for gluing the components was the guy that demonstrated the first Fuji machine to me.
Wow. It's like, right? Like,
So the actual infancy of it.
And he was the amazing thing was he was so proud of the fact that he had created the means of gluing to put a little curl on the glue.
So the early days of solder deposition were done with emulsion screens rather than today's stencils, right? It was a woven mesh screen that had emulsion built up. That's how you could control your volume. But you didn't have 100% open area because you had that weave pattern in there, and that's
the ideal opening angle of the screen is 22.4.
22.5 degrees. Yeah, 82.0. Yeah. So that's why
Yes,
you
had
have
to
screen
remember that.
printers. That's why they're named that way.
Oh,
'cause
really?
They used to use screens.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, stencils were not known.
Yeah,
That's-
they should be called stencil printers or
Right.
something, but screen printing, because, we have both. So it's an interchangeable term, but they're completely different machines.
The first laser printed stencils, cost me thousands of dollars.
Yeah. I've seen the pricing models and longed for them. You would get a very low included threshold of apertures, and then you would have to pay X cents per additional aperture. So obviously I wasn't around in those days, but my father was. So yeah.
Yeah, he showed me an invoice the other day from like a
1995
stencil invoice, and it was how much more?
I mean, the base price was like $700, and then it was 15 or 25 cents an aperture after that.
And somehow they've gotten cheaper, right?
Yeah,
It's just it's amazing. Like, it doesn't usually work that way.
I know.
But,
One of the few industries where
Yeah.
we're under mandate that you have to reduce your prices by at least 20% every year. We're masochists.
Yeah.
But our industry is lucky to have folks like yourself that have that experience and have that knowledge to where you can see, oh, I've seen this before. Insert the technology, right? Replace SMT with AI, but you've seen these trends, you've seen these struggles, and to be able to associate a contemporary challenge with something that you've overcome in the past, we need that. We need all of that we can get, because it shortens the learning curve for us.
Or we put his brain into a LLM.
Yeah.
But we also need people like you. I mean, this morning, Sean, I mean, that suggestion of coming up with a dictionary, defining the terms for AI. I mean, that's an excellent
Well, it felt like the Tower of Babel, right? Everyone had different languages going on, right? And different things going on. And I was like, let's define the language first, because how will A talk to B without another translator in there? It was almost like Spanish was trying to talk to French, and French was trying to talk to German, and then we all wanted the output in English, right? And it was kind of like, well, we need to define the language first. It's like
Although
every
we had
coding
an
software.
international- I mean, I don't know if you realize we had folks from Europe,
No.
a fellow from China, Jamil is up in Toronto. So, I mean, we were crossing a lot of boundaries.
Yeah, it looked like the United Nations in there. I won't lie, but I didn't know they were all from all different, because that's America, really.
Yeah.
But it was.
Well, let's talk quickly about, the outlook for AI. I mean, the area I'm most excited about is this component sourcing and quoting. And, I've heard from a number of sources say, we have that already accomplished. Well, those of us, I'm back in the trenches now. I've agreed a couple months ago to be interim general manager for a multinational company. And, one of that company's mandates is to become more automated. Well, they've been around for 35 years. You would think that doing sourcing of components and quoting would be a very streamlined process. It's still a multi-day process. Well, as competition gets stiffer, and in the EMS world, I think you're going to see stiffer competition emerging here in the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. If we can't respond quicker to customer needs, it's going to make it that much tougher for the customer to want to, give you the order.
Yeah.
And then furthermore, if you can't, particularly now that we're seeing more and more minimum order quantities, and we're seeing some allocations, if we get those kind of little surprises from the bill of materials from a customer and then have to pass that on to the customer, it's not going to bode well for follow-on orders. So, it's got to make things pretty challenging.
Yeah, especially when they're already complaining about the price as is.
Well,
yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And then, in my case, representing a multinational company, with the dynamics of pricing coming in onshore, it's really, really making a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an awesome chat, Phil, and I hope that you will take us up on the offer I'm about to make to come on to our podcast so we can have
A long
somewhere
form
around an
conversation.
hour talk with you, because there's so many more questions I have for you.
We've blown through our time, and the conversation's
It's
nowhere
just
near over.
starting.
And
so
like, honestly, the tip of
It's
the
a slice,
iceberg,
yeah.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, we'd
Yeah.
love to talk to you in a longer form if you'll formally agree to it live on film.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
Phil.
Thank you,
It's been
Phil.
great.
Oh, my pleasure.